Hey, you're Addison, Brazil.
Yeah, I am. Hi, random British guy.
Didn't you write First Year at Grief Club, a gift from a friend who gets it?
Yes, I did. Did my mom pay you to ask me that?
No, I'm sorry for your loss, mate. Why don't you do a podcast to help people honor their grief?
You know, you're not the first person to say that. You know what? Fine, I'll do it. But it has to be with my friends who get it. And it has to be for real people who get real life grief. Oh, and it absolutely has to be equal parts honor the journey and find the funny.
What does that mean?
I think you're about to find out. I'm Addison, Brazil. Grief Club, the podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of Grief Club, the podcast, where I take parts of my book, First Year of Grief Club, a gift from a friend who gets it, and use them as launching points for deeper conversation. This week, we have a very special guest, somebody that I mention throughout the book. Jenifer Merifield, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, of course. And I'm sure people will be excited to meet you, especially as they make their way through anything I do, but of course you're mentioned in the book as my beautiful stranger. And we'll have to tell that story at some point in this episode, just like, so people get how magical, it truly is. So to start, I just like to give you a chance actually to check in with me. So we're going to do a conscious emotional check-in. This is something we do throughout the book, but also I just try to do in life to just know where I'm at whenever I'm entering any sort of situation, especially with something where we're going to discuss grief a little bit and go into that. So if you want to take a deep breath. In one word, how are you feeling mentally?
Clear.
Excited. In one word, how are you feeling physically?
A little buzzy.
I'm going to say crunched.
Okay.
And we'll get at the end of the episode why. And in one word, how are you feeling emotionally right now?
Emotionally, honored. So honored.
I'm going to say grateful. Always grateful when I get to see you. So I have so many ways of explaining you. For those listening, as it's mentioned in my book, Jen was my first and most formidable, is that a word? Excellence mentor and coach. And you know what? At the height of my grief process, I'm going to say it now because the magic kind of goes in, but at the height of my grief process, from my perspective, I was called back to Canada to deal with my dad's very complicated estate. And it kind of like just grabbed me by the ankles and pulled me back under into all the triggers of both the grief process of my brother and my father and sort of all the complications around that. And I knew I had to fly the next morning. And actually the night before I flew, I was just kind of hyper thinking as I do, and kind of really going for it. And I finally just threw my hands up, and it was the first time that I talked to something bigger than myself since my dad had passed. And I just said, I need help. And the next morning I boarded my flight to Toronto, and I was really trying to just watch bad movies and feel sorry for myself in my window seat. And I was quite frustrated at that it was just so packed on that plane, and we had that person in the middle seat, and I just wanted to wish them away, no matter who they were. It was nothing personal. I just wanted the space. And I think right before we took off, the flight attendant came over and said to the lady who was between us, "Oh, you actually can go sit with your husband." And I think we both kind of clocked each other because we had both been told that the flight was full and there was no moving. We had both, for some reason, tried to move seats that day, and there was
even
no
had
moving.
People move their bags underneath because we were so packed.
Right. And so it was like, how's that happening? But obviously we weren't going to complain, kind of thing. And anyways, I looked over and I saw Jen kind of smiling at me. And this is so not me, because I'm so Canadian and so polite. And usually I'm shy, but I would always be polite and engaged. But this might be the one time in my life that I was kind of standoffish almost. I was like, what? Like,
Little
what you want to talk to me? Like, you don't even understand what's going on in my life. You have no idea, kind of thing, was my total energy. And I remember even taking my headphone out, but like not really taking it out because I wanted
I
you to
was getting
know
the
it was
message.
going
Yeah,
back
I was getting
in.
the message.
Like, you know,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
just remember you said something about where you're coming from and that you had clients, and I kind of just like looked at you funny, and I'll just never forget you saying, "Why did you ask for help?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And it was like this thing where the headphones like came out and just like this like first of many deep breaths of being in your presence. And
Yeah.
you know, the rest, it really is history. I mean, from that point on, I mean, you really became my number one. Or I know you'd probably prefer that I'm my number one. So, you know, my number two, my at Thunder Road, you know, and really have been just a friend, a coach, a mentor, and just the most trusted confidant of all time through what my readers and listeners will know then, you know, a few months later is when I only begin my third grief journey. And the accident happens, and all the physical and mental and emotional part of my journey that was yet to come. So I was sort of gifted you at this moment of exactly when I asked for help for the first time in a long time, and also preemptively for what I could have never known was coming. So, gosh, now I just want to do the gratitude week episode because I'm just in such a place of gratitude. I'm like, let's talk about how much we're grateful for each other. But
yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that? Is the longest
I mean,
intro of all time.
I would add that the night before the flight, I was trying to cancel mine and get onto a different flight because I had this big layover and I was, or sorry, big wait, like a wait. And I tend to manifest those types of things really easily. I was like, no, it'll happen. And they were saying they couldn't. I was like, well, let's try this. And how about this? And I thought, well, I'll just show up at the airport and ask, and it's just going to happen because it just, these things happen easy for me. And it wasn't happening. I was like, you know what? Life wants me on that plane, and I'm just going to trust it. So when you say, I was looking over, you know, grinning at you, because I was like, this person left in the middle, and it was like packed, like you said. And when that space opened, I was like, oh, I was grinning because I was like, this is the reason why I need to be here on this plane. And I saw you doing the like, yeah, like, it was like, no, I'm not gonna let that, slip until we find out. But it was a brilliant 5.5 hour deep conversations. I always wonder too, do you ever wonder about other people on the plane who were listening? If anyone got anything from that?
Well, they might have got the template for a very good movie or HBO show, as written at the time, which we worked on rewriting, at least my perspective of all of that. But it really is, and it's so funny when you said that about, you know, how things always work out for you. And I went to say me too, and I'm like, no, not then, not that Addison. He did not manifest this. Like, he was like, of course this would happen. Of course.
Oh, okay.
Like, you know,
Which
so
is
it's so funny to see that contrast now, of because
but
whenever
that's
someone
also getting what you put out there. You were still getting the, of course, this will go wrong, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. No, it shows up. And now I think of the last 2 years nomading around and literally having no plans ever and going, oh, it will work out, it will be magical, and it
just
always
does.
is. Like every single time. It's like I even get, like you said, like excited when I'm not able to manifest what I think I want, and then I'm like, ooh, why am I here now? But it's like that's in deep contrast to, you know, the height of my grief process, where people listening may find themselves, you know, that's that Addison that was on that plane pre-Jen, you know, it's like pre-BC and post afterlife. You know, that guy definitely wasn't there. So it's a really cool little, on top of checking in with our one words, just like where life's at, and where I'm coming at to this, you know, today and with the book.
Yeah, look at you, published author now, doing all kinds of amazing things out there. And
One day at a
you were the kid on the plane, you know, when I met you, and now look at you. Holy cow.
The kid on the plane. There's another working title. The kid on the plane. So one thing that I like to do, obviously that's a very special occurrence, that, you know, we do such a personal intro and the backstory there, and maybe it shouldn't be, maybe because I am magically connected to people, that almost everybody who ends up being a guest, you know, it is that kind of magic. But I would love for you, I always give the guests an opportunity just to kind of honor your journey openly for a few minutes. And that can just be sharing your journey to what you do and how you show up in the world. It can include grief. It doesn't have to, but what if we gave our listeners an insight into what honoring your journey has been like, and how it allows you to show up today the way you do?
Okay, I would love to. I'd love to do the grief angle as well, to throw that in, just because it's, and it's so, look, I got you. Well, what I do for a living, obviously, is, what happened on the plane is, really helping people to find their truth, and to find the beauty in all the things, and to end up in a place of, I have an extraordinary life. And whatever that may be, is to fully accept and love anything and everything, past, present, ideas of future, so that that flow happens. And I'm also a human, of course, and I have things that come up, and I have my challenges, and I find this process is more about knowing that the bumps in the road are going to happen, but then catching it sooner, so that the pivot can happen quicker, and noticing that, okay, what's this really about? Just similar to the story about, wanting to get a different flight, and it not happening, going, okay, so yeah, I'm going to be uncomfortable curled in this airport chair for 5.5, 6 hours waiting, but what am I waiting for? I don't even know, because life's got some idea for me, because there's no way it would be this much of a challenge. And of course there was. Here we are having a podcast. And so, having the human experiences and all that, and I do feel all the feels in all the ways, and have all the emotions, and the grief for me, I find, is, I love your book, and I love your approach in helping people with it. And I certainly got my own insights from it, and really, really love the realness of what it is. And for me, my, grief, I find, in not just in death, but I guess that's, kind of more where we'll go today, but grief in just, anything that's a loss that was meaningful. And sort of, the roller coaster of the pain of, sometimes it's so present and so real, you can almost taste it. And, other times it's like, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that person. Oh, should I feel guilty? I haven't thought about them for a few days or weeks. The deaths in my life would be the most prominent ones would be my dad 17 years ago, and my two grandmothers, who were just like incredible women, just, my feminine look up to, goddesses in the world, who just really showed me so much of life and myself and what's possible. And finding, for me, in dealing with the grief, it's more finding ways to keep them present in beautiful ways. And I think probably later you can ask me other questions that I can share more detail about that. But allowing the sadness, allowing it, and sometimes being really pissed off, like sometimes I know with my dad, it's just like, damn it, you should be here for this. Like, you're missing really good things that, would have been really great to have your feedback and your presence. And just with me and my dad, to be able to have the debate, like to be able to go in deep and have those amazing conversations and visit all the angles of certain things. But then also saying, okay, so what's the gift in them not being here? And how can I remember to honor those lives and what that was, more so than having the pain, allowing the sadness and the grief, but also consciously choosing personally to make sure it's like at least 51% more of the what I prefer, want, and love to hold on to keep that balance. And we've talked lots about, pity parties. If I'm going to be like, stomp my feet and grumpy, pissy, I'm just going to go and like, I'm going to time it and be like, I'm giving myself permission for this amount of time. I'm going there. And then I'm going to, fluff off and dust off and get back at it.
I love that. And I do want to share, because I do in the book, in big bold letters, I think on one of the pages, you actually said the same thing that I kind of came to as my definition of grief, which is grief is the loss of anything meaningful. It's not always a physical death, and people can approach this book, with that as well, and just in general, just their, their journey. What are some of the prominent, if you feel like sharing it all, like maybe, some of the, you don't have to go into detail, but what are some of those grief processes that weren't necessarily a physical death, but definitely, initiated that process of grief and grieving?
Um, yeah, I would say, without getting into too much detail, certain phases of life, of realizing, oh, it's coming to completion, either with a person or with just a personal phase, or even sometimes I find like getting to a new level in life, like success, you could call it, or achievement. There's that like, yeah, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, wow, I did it. This is great. And then going, oh, wait a second. But what about that version of me that was so prominent and so real? And so that was who I was. And now realizing there's more, and sort of like that feeling of sadness. There's that little sadness of, but I love and honor and cherish that which was. I don't want to stay there. Like, yes, I'm glad to be moving on, but also like there's like a nostalgia or something to it. That's just,
Yeah, well, that I resonate with that deeply, and I love to get people to promise things while they're on air. So do you promise that 50 weeks from now, when we're at the purpose and meaning stage, you will come back and we will just talk about that? Because that's a huge thing later in the grief process,
I
is
promise.
being scared to let go of, the person that was attached to whatever's been lost, and not wanting to change. And we talk a little bit about that in the Science of Grief episode too, that's actually something that we're trying to avoid, is changing in any way, because we're losing the bond. But that's such a very real thing. And when I think about it, obviously, I have these 3 bullet points that, now, because of what I've chosen to do, I say often and I hear often when being referred to. But as I've, honored and kind of worked through some of those grief processes, they've revealed these other, rites of passage and big shifts in my life, where, and like you said, sometimes I have found myself grieving at the most successful point, that I thought would be the moment, and then I feel sad, like I've left myself behind, or I know that version better and this is uncomfortable. And so I just think it's always nice to highlight that, even if a physical death is bringing you to this conversation, or even if it's not, that there are all those, and I call them in the book micro grief processes. But when I say micro, not that they're small, because we don't measure, not that they're small, but that we're not noticing them, because there's something that society would call like a validated bigger grief process, which is usually a physical death, and that gets a funeral, and that gets condolences.
The weight of it, you mean, more.
Yeah, and it's acknowledged. And these micro grief processes of job change, relationship shift, it's like even something like divorce, or kids going to school, or these things that are so quote unquote normal. I always have to explain what I'm doing, because I forget not everybody will be watching this. So it's like the air quotes aren't seen, So anyway, yeah, I like to always pop back in and be human in the middle of a monologue about grief. But yeah, no, I think it's such a good thing to continually highlight, is that those grief processes are also something you're honoring every day, just like, the physical deaths, and that they can be happening simultaneously, and one can show up more than the other, even if it's in the immediate aftermath. Like I found a lot was heightened by physical deaths, and losing those close to me around these grief processes that I had long ignored, because I had been, avoiding the word grief, period, or it just had not been formally handed to me like it was when, you lose a brother, or, like that was like, oh, this is grief. This is bad. This is, everyone is going to get
welcome
this,
to this new shadow in your life.
Yeah, exactly. So I just,
what, Addison, if I can jump in on something you said before about, when it's new and when it happens, and the success versus the leaving the part. I would say it has a lot to do with familiarity. And so it's sort of like the new, the success, the things that we want, the places we aspire to be. And then we get there and then it's like, yay, but then it's like, oh, this is a little uncomfortable. And I would say it's a lot of that discomfort is because it's not familiar. And so looking back to the familiar, the comfort zone, maybe even we could say, is like that safety. I know what that feels like. And sometimes we choose to feel like shit because it's safer and it's more comfortable. And the unfamiliar is the unknown. It's well, what is that? And can I be that? And do I still have this safety to go back here? And so choosing both, I guess, is what I would get to, is allow ourselves to go back to that familiar comfort place, but not letting go of the new, the unfamiliar, because the unfamiliar will soon be something that is, normal and comfortable and within the new comfort zone and the okay, good place to be.
I love that. At this point, I usually say, and you kind of have answered it, but I usually say, if someone walked up to you on the street, and just said, "What's grief?" What would your human response be to someone you've not worked with, someone who doesn't know you at all, but just like a very pedestrian response, like what is that for you?
I mean, the human part of me, if someone walked up live on the street, is I think I would probably like lock eyes and say, "Are you okay? What's going on for you right now?" And before I would get into a words kind of thing, I think my natural reaction would be like, "Do you need a hug?"
I
Like,
love that.
I
I love that. So if a kid said, like saying like, "What's that? What's this? Why? They
Yeah.
hear me, in the next room doing a grief interview, and then they walk up to you and say, "What does grief mean?" What do you say?
Yeah. I would say grief is a state that your body goes into when you lost something that was meaningful to you. And it can feel uncomfortable, and it can make you mad and sad, and it can, make you cry and laugh and think of all kinds of things you haven't thought about before. And it's okay. And it's okay to have it and to not want it and to want it. And it's something that happens, and it's almost an honor to be in it, because it just relates to something very meaningful.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna breathe that in. I'm going to give our listeners a second, and we'll be right back.
You've reached Grief Club. Leave a message after the beep.
Hey Grief Club, it's me again. Yeah, I know you probably thought you were going to get a break from listening to me talk, but I just wanted to check in and find out how I'm doing. I mean, really, you can be really honest with me. I'm like a different Addison from the Addison that's recording in this episode, because this is recorded at a different time, so you can tell me the truth. The best way to do that is to leave a review and like the podcast, but only if you like it. I really think it will help other people who need it find it, so I greatly appreciate you doing that. Back to me.
All right, we're back with Jenifer Merifield, and we've already planted seeds in this conversation, which is amazing. You kind of, when you were honoring your journey, you said things that really stuck out to me. And honestly, one of the main reasons that I was probably inspired in part by you to go back and write this book was just this idea of, there are things that if I had known sooner when they were first happening, obviously it would have been very different. And I don't get caught up in that, but I do feel very excited about being able to, deliver the book and deliver my message and go, hey, if I had known this a lot earlier, or this is what I really would have wanted to know in week 1, in month 1, in year 1,
Right.
versus, not knowing what to offer someone, and some of, the flowers and condolences and hugs and, all of that, which were all great in their moment. But whenever people kind of kept pressing me for like, yeah, but what would you say after what you've been through? Like, what would you do?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest ones that stuck with me from our work together, and, everything I've ever been able to get my hands on of your work and your wisdom, is this idea that you taught me, that you teach people how to treat you. And that's something that really, really took a long time to to digest, which, so if you're listening today, it's not all going to happen today, but it is something, it is one of the ones where I go, okay, if that was in my toolkit a little bit earlier, then, you know, I could have taken a little bit more responsibility in how I was being supported earlier. And the last thing we want to do when you're, you know, in the brunt of a death that would lead you to seek help or to listen to this or to read my book, you know, or if you've been gifted it, you know, is think, oh, I have to take on any more. But it's actually this investment that in the long run, this concept, I really do think that planting this seed early and delicately for somebody changes everything. So I do it sort of indirectly in the first 7 days in the book in offering what I call resilience responses. Is, you know, there's going to be this time when, you know, people are coming to you for the first time in relation to your grief. And this is this week is really your first opportunity of how you respond and how you teach people how to treat you within your grief. And I even go as far as to say, and I don't know is a perfectly good answer. And leading with that is almost better than, you know, accepting maybe support that doesn't feel good or doesn't feel like it's helping in the moment. And if I were able to take everyone around someone who's grieving, the sentence I would arm them with is, what does support look like for you right now? That's something that, like, I find myself consistently saying, because it really, like, our conscious check-ins in that moment empowers the griever, the human, to say, well, in this moment, blank, because, you know, it shifts for me every hour outside of grief. You know, sometimes I want you to just be in the room, but not talk. Sometimes I want to talk. Sometimes I want to just, you know, do something silly and funny. Sometimes I just need to just rant. You know, it's so different in every moment. Sometimes it is a casserole. Sometimes, you know, it is those things. It's just, you know, someone warming it up for you, or, you know, and this sounds silly, but I just don't have the energy to feed myself right now. And I know that's important, whatever it is. So I want to go into this idea just a little bit more of how at this sort of early stage, when there's already enough going on, if maybe we can go into this concept a little bit more of, you know, people are going to be coming up to you a lot right now, and they're going to be doing what they think is helpful to you. And we're going to assume that your benefit is what they have in mind. Skip that. You know, and jump, if we're assuming that, you know, what would you suggest in sort of the gentle walking your way into, like, teaching people how to treat you at a time when it's going to set up, you know, this grieving process?
It's so great. And I love that part of the book too, because I think that part of the book for me, when I read your book, I was thinking of, like, all the clients I'm going to give it to and all the ones that I've suggested it to since then. And that part felt like relief to me, felt like, oh, now there's a tool that, like, is something that's going to instantly come up, because we want to be nice. And even in our own grief, no matter how painful, we still are concerned about other people's feelings and being nice. And so that part was just so, you can still say it in a nice way and still get what you want. I think you had like 4 or 5 suggestions there. But
one rule on this show is we never ask Addison to quote his own book, because he can't.
I love it.
Someone quoted something to me in an interview last week, and I said, that's beautiful. And he's like, well, you wrote it, so I'm glad you think so. Like, oh, he's like, I have a specific question about page whatever, and I'm like, oh, I didn't study my own book.
I love it so much.
Allow the
you can just say, like, let me just find that page. Better if I read it.
That sounds like great advice. Could you tell me more about that?
Oh, I wrote that.
Well, that's why you're here.
Amazing. Love that so much. No, I actually, that says some cool things about you. I like that. So I would say, teaching people, you know, we teach people how to treat us by how we show up, by the boundaries we put in place, by the responses we give. And I always say, like, in the beginning of any new relationship, be very cognizant of how you want the future of your relationship. And that could be a relationship with the cashier at this grocery store, or, you know, with the person or anybody, because how we set it up in the beginning creates the expectations. And, you know, even people we already have relationships with in our life, when something new happens, like a death, you know, we're in a grieving process, or a new success or something like that, it's like starting a new part of a relationship with the person, with this new big thing in your life. And so it's another new beginning. opportunity to establish what is most beneficial to you. And so, if we show up and be really polite, and that's okay. Oh, thank you. I would love another casserole. We set ourselves up for resentment. And we start to have less patience for people, because when one person or three people, say the things that are like little needles, like, oh, gosh, it's not what I want to hear right now. It's okay. But when 20 people say it, then we can start to, take it out on them. But for them, it's the first time saying it.
Right.
Death is one of those things that it's so awkward just to know what to say to the person. And I've talked to people who have said, yeah, I haven't responded to the post of so-and-so passed away because I've spent 2 hours trying to think of what to say. And I'm so sad and so uncomfortable, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. And someone then posts what I wanted to say. Now I can't say this. And it's just, it's such your book is so great about saying, like, this is not a thing that we just know how to deal with. And it comes up so differently for everybody. There's no right way to grieve. And so your brilliant idea to talk about this is to us choosing, this is the way. So, saying things like, instead of appeasing, or instead of just yes to everything, saying, I need to be alone right now, or I would prefer not to talk about this. Can I please let you know? I appreciate your sentiment. So even if they say something that feels like, why would you say that? Like, suck it up. Things are going to get better. Like, those are the things like, oh God, like, I don't want to hear that right now. Remember that it's the sentiment behind it. It's that person who might walk away and go, God, did I say that? Oh my God. Like, but people don't know what to say. So see the sentiment behind it. Want, like, do that if you have to what they actually said. Thank you for the sentiment. Can I please let you know how to support me when I am able to thoughtfully come up with an idea? Right now, I want to be alone.
I wanted to like hit like a buzzer almost when you said it earlier, but this is something that I had in the pre-notes for this conversation, which of course I then don't look at. But for anyone that this may be a new idea, and this, again, I always forget, like, that's 13 years later I'm having this thought. That's not in the moment that you may find yourself in. You, in the face of loss, you are in a new relationship with yourself and everyone you've already known as well. And that might seem so wild to even think about, but there's been this big shift. And so, I mean, that's really kind of what I try to break down in the grief world, if I can, is it's not about learning to live without somebody. It's about learning who you are again in that loss. And so every time, like, it's weird, but it is first dates. It is first conversations again, because it's you within this loss, and it can bring, as you're saying, each of those things, I'm brought back to that week. And it's equally this thing where, it feels like it was Instagram likes or Facebook comments at the time, where it's sort of on your birthday, you're sort of like, how many are there, but not necessarily aware of like each one. It'd almost be better if they came over a week and you could, be with each one, but it's like, oh, I got a lot of texts. That's good. I feel supported. I feel loved. And like, it can feel like that because it's just sort of overwhelming and everyone's supposed to let you know something, that's kind of where you can be coming at it from. But then, this idea of like thinking of each of these engagements as like the first time, setting that up is something that, again, if I could just grab myself and kind of say, hey, you're going to be, like you said, angry or resentful about this later if you don't ask for the support you actually need when you know what you need. If you don't know, you don't know. Then, it's like, okay, let's try that. Or one of the things I say in there is like, when I know, can I let you know? Because I may need you in a month. I may need help cooking in 3 months. There's this whole process, that's there. But I just really wanted to highlight that, because I don't think that's something that was said to me that you just said so beautifully. Is like, this is a new relationship, and again, that's that. I want familiar. I don't want uncomfortable. I don't want every relationship to be new. But ignoring that feels like sort of like not an investment in the long-term well-being of this process. Is like, starting right now and doing those things. And, obviously so much of what I offered comes from, what you taught me. So it's like, it's like so funny because you're like, I'm so proud of you for saying this. And I'm like, I'm so proud of you for teaching me this. It's like that's,
Yeah.
but because when
Yeah.
you take those concepts and apply them very specifically to the beginnings of grief, what a difference, that can really make in the long run. And I think really helps sustain relationships that you want to be there for you later. There's going to be anger, there's going to be resentment, there's going to be pushing away right now. And so the only thing you can do is honor what you're feeling in the moment and really ask for what support is for you right now. And again, I didn't get to gather, and Jen didn't get to gather everyone around you right now and only say, what does support look like for you right now? So,
how can I support
you
you
taught
right now?
me is like, when I'm not hearing what I wish I was hearing, is like to hear that, and go and respond as if they said that, with the love as if they said that, because they don't know to say that. I haven't taught them to treat me that way
We have
yet,
to teach them what to say. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, like anything we want, if we just feel like, and this goes into like, put this into any category that this pops up in your mind. Well, they should have known that about me. Like, you're not going to get what you want if you don't get specific on what you want, or at least start giving some hints. Just expecting people to, well, that's my partner, that's my family, that's my best friend, they should know. Well, we don't. And it's good to be able to ask. The other thing I want to just jump in real quick is, for anyone who's listening, if this has already happened and you've already gotten to that resentment point, or gotten to that point of like, damn it, I wish I knew this sooner, you can like stop right now and start again and say, you know what, I've really gotten clear of what support looks like to me, and can I make a little adjustment and ask if we only talk about this, or if we don't talk about this anymore, or if you ever feel like making me a casserole, I would love one. You know what I mean? Where it's like, but you get to choose, and you get to correct and continue. So realize that something's not serving you doesn't mean now you're a victim to it for the rest of your life. You can stop and then make the acknowledgement out loud of, this is what I prefer. And that's uncomfortable, but whatever, you get over it, push through.
Yeah, no, and I think it's something you can just also put in your back pocket no matter what's going on right now. And at least, like I said, like, you did kind of hear it, and later it might make sense. A lot of the things that we talked about originally, and it's like years later that I'm like, oh, here it is, here it is. Because truthfully, in the moment, and we're early in this, so I do want to be candid, and so people get to know what they're really signing up for, because I have no intention of doing this podcast and not like being me. Like, I hate the idea that there's something for me to do when I'm grieving, I'm there with you if that's what you're feeling right now, and you're just like, no, I don't want to have to do anything or teach anybody anything, kind of thing. I get that, but later there's going to be that moment where you're like, and so what I'm just trying to do is be, the friend who gets it, who is like, hey, I just wanted to take you aside, now, and when it fits, it fits. But I love that part. And for anyone listening, that's something like, I feel like, whatever each of the processes are, I can't even do the math in my head right now. One's 14, one's 8, one's 5, these grief processes. I find myself stopping and starting almost every day, because as I shift, and what honoring means for me changes every day, like what honoring looks like for me because of where I am in my own process, or maybe sometimes it feels like where I've fallen back to, I stop and start all the time and go, hey, I know that we kind of got to this place where I was really thriving, and and it's like, support kind of is back to this for me right now. And and I just try to really not ever let that feel like any sort of defeat, that's
not to feel like
we've
it's
set up.
And something you had talked about in the past several times on other podcasts, and is that there's no finish line. Like, it's not something that you're arriving to, oh, I'm done with grief. Oh, okay. Yay. I did it. I did all the steps. And like, you can have a day, a week, a month, a year where it's like, F this, I'm not going to do the process. I'm going to just feel sorry for myself and grieve hard in all the ugly ways that, aren't so eloquent. And do it as much time as you want, and just knowing that, hop back on the stuff that serves you more whenever you want, because that's the humanness about us, is there's no supposed to, no only way. Like your book is a brilliant guide to, you know, jump ahead a little bit, jump back a little bit, move around. Like you can have this with you, even though it's a set amount of time, like loosely, like my dad died 17 years ago, and I'm flipping through this going, ooh, I like this right now. Yeah, I'm going to do this right now. This feels really good. And like you said, it's been many years and you're still having these realizations and these little light bulb moments. So,
and that fighting the, like, that it's always going to be experimental, that it's always going to be there to honor, is something that's like so natural. Like as you bring that up, I'm like, I have the same thing where I'm like, hey, well, you know, you seem to be struggling, why don't you open the book you wrote about this? Like, you know, and I just like so resentful with myself that even I have to, but I'm like, but I wrote it, I shouldn't have to still honor it. Like, you know, and it's like, oh, buddy, okay, come sit down, let's have some tea and talk about that for a minute.
It's like the kid, the random person on the street. What is grief? Do you need a hug? Come here. You know?
I love that you're the first person that I've talked to that didn't go into head when I asked that question and went into heart. Well, this is what I would do. I really, I mean, I'm not surprised. And it's such a beautiful way for listeners to get to know you. But, you know, it's very interesting, and myself included. Like, as we know, I'm a thinker about thinking kind of guy. But yeah, such a beautiful, like, literal example of, you know, you always saying, like, drop it your head, go from your heart kind of thing. And yeah, that's really magical.
Thank you. I wanted to also mention being the giver of the condolences, because as we're talking, I'm thinking, I hope we're not putting across that if you're the giver of the condolences, if there's now some open, you know, unspoken, well, now whenever you're needed, the door's open and you got to jump in and make the casseroles 14 months from now, or show up, you know, whatever. Whereas you also have a choice, and you also are creating a new relationship in this of teaching what to expect from you. So some people I know are very like, sorry, man, or a heart emoji, and that's what they got, and that's beautiful, perfect, whole, and complete in their own way, and there doesn't need to be, you know, whereas other people are like, let me do all the things, I am fully in this with you by your side, and that could be your neighbor versus your, you know, your someone in your family, and again, it's not to judge because they're blood they should, because of the relationship they should, it's just if we can just honor, you know, people's processing comfort level and natural tendencies to show up in different ways, and just know it's the sentiment behind it, see the beauty in that. And so if you're a type of person who is like, not my thing, not comfortable, not whatever, what do I say, and you know, you don't have to, how can I support you, what does support look like to you, you can just send the heart emoji, or say, you know, say that, you know, offering you my condolence. You can do the Hallmark type of response that will show that there's my sentiment and I'm disconnecting, because, you know, for that, I just didn't want it to come across like we're saying,
and
everyone has to be.
I do want to say, like, I feel like it's such a good invitation in this moment, and so early in this like journey of talking about this. There is a lot out there that criticizes how people shouldn't deal with grief. And I want to be the first to say, and I openly talked about this, but I didn't write about it necessarily, or maybe I did, who knows? I think maybe in the prologue, but like, who knows? There's no way to know. You'd have to actually read it. But you know, half of the reason 98% of the reason that I wrote the book was because after dealing with all of these losses and 13 years in what I call the grief arena, every time someone shares a significant loss with me, I freeze. And it's be very easy for me to critique what everybody else did, but I always remind myself that I freeze. I, the guy who's been just to the left of death, like, you know, like I have no idea what to do for them. And that freeze, selfishly, in some ways became the pull for this book, is like, you know, why are you freezing? And it was, for me, it was obviously because, well, I'd like to stay with them for a year if I'm going to get involved. And that's why the book's written the way it is. You know, that's what when I pulled that apart, but I cannot, like, no matter how much I've been through, every time. And when you write a book about grief, let me tell you, a lot of people come up to you on the street and tell you who died and when, and that's something you're sort of inviting.
Aw,
And I
beautiful.
still freeze, and I, now I've gotten to a better place of, thanking them and saying, like, I'm there with you, and however I can help you to honor that journey, I'm happy to. But also, again, on that side of it, with the boundaries of what I'm able to do as someone who's being supportive, because I do have my own process there. And so one thing that it reminds me when you say that too is, did that person consent to supporting you any more than they have either,
Right.
like, because there's that expectation piece of what
Yeah.
should and shouldn't
Yeah.
happen. And you know
Yeah.
what, every tool is there, for its reason in that moment. And if blame and focusing on that are getting you through like the just unbearable moments, then yeah, that's there. And I've had that, and I look back now and go, oh, you were really trying not to feel your heart ache.
Yeah.
You were really focusing on what everybody else was doing. But again, I think that I would have tenderly loved that seed to be planted a little earlier, of going, oh, that, I guess that is my expectation. And am I teaching them how to treat me? If they are providing support that's not supportive, or if they've chosen to, just like you said, like a heart emoji, perfectly sufficient. That's where they're also at in their journey. And it's like, you can't ask for the space to honor your journey and then not be honoring other people's. And I think that's
Yes.
sort of, I think, like the movie moment of, I always think in like screenwriting and like, these arcs, but
Yeah.
that's the seed of, it was the seed at the end of the plane ride, and it's been the seed in every session, every conversation we've had ever since, is something that you truly want to gift to yourself. If you don't gift it to everyone else around you, then it's not, and that's hard to go, I want to be seen this way, I want to be loved this way, but this person doesn't deserve it because of X. And it's a time that we can really just kind of slow down and just kind of go, and
Yeah. Which also goes into the not taking it personally if we don't receive the kind of support that we're hoping and wishing for and expecting without verbalizing, is to just to remember, the people's, like, when someone dies, it feels like the world stops. It feels like life stops, but everyone else's life is still going, and still, and there's, and it's taking it all in. It's very overwhelming in so many ways. And so, yeah, there's going to be moments where, we don't necessarily behave all that well, and we forget about other people's feelings at the same time. And, but in those moments where we do, is where we get to get clear on what do we want, what support would feel good. And can we see the loving sentiment beneath the, however, even if someone says one of those things that are like, did you just say that really? Just knowing, like, okay, they didn't know what else to say, or they thought that's what they should say or supposed to say, and take the high road and move past that.
Yeah. And like you said at the beginning, if anything you just said, or when it happens, set that timer for 30 minutes and let it out. We're not saying don't,
Oh yeah,
like allow
absolutely, yeah.
everything you're
In a
feeling,
healthy way.
yeah, in a healthy way,
Yeah.
which we talk about later
But
as
you know what
well.
else? And people will have, like, I'll say this for other reasons outside of grief, like anger or frustration or whatever, set that timer. But even if you set it for 10 minutes, most people will get to the 3, 4, 5 minute and start looking at the clock going, is it almost done? Like, I'm spent. That's
I don't need
enough.
to be angry for a full 10 minutes.
But when we don't set a timer to fully consciously focus that energy and let it out, we drip it throughout the day, and it can drip throughout weeks and months and lifetimes, unfortunately, for some people, if we're not giving attention to the stuff that's bubbling up and trying to be seen and be heard.
And I've definitely set an alarm for a pity party and snoozed a couple times. So if anybody needs extra time,
Yeah,
that happens too.
Yeah.
Speaking of time,
Yes.
never exists when we're together, which
I
is
know.
so
We could
beautiful.
talk for
But
hours.
obviously, I've been so good. with the editors of staying, and I knew this one would be the biggest challenge of all because we could talk for 4 hours.
Easy.
The other thing that I really wanted to dive into, and I think it does go hand in hand. So there's this focus on teaching those around you at this time, and that really being something that makes you feel responsible and, helps you to honor your journey. It's not about judgment. The other thing that comes up at this time, and depending on what's or who's been lost and how, there's so many variations. I'm the friend who gets it, but I'm not saying that I get what you're going through, because I know it's just so specific to each relationship.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at here is that, and we sort of started to go into this, is that judgment isn't just going towards other people sometimes, or that noticing, it's also coming quite harshly on ourselves and how we're acting and what's coming up in our own minds in the wake of loss. And I know that, for instance, right after my father died, there was like a huge outburst of anger. And I really thought I was going to and I think I talked about this on another episode, I was going to throw the microwave story, rip the microwave out of the wall and just throw it, not at anyone, but in the general direction of everybody who was, I thought was triggering and heightening me more, and it wasn't one of those things where I felt rightful in it at all. I retreated, and then I sent text messages to my mother kind of saying, I think it would be best if I left the house with my younger sister still around. And, my mother was a collector of people. There was always many people around us, her big heart, and luckily I had a mother who said, if you can't be angry here, where can you be angry? Of course you're angry, it's days after kind of thing. But I really felt like I should go, and I had that tendency where I was my own strict parent in the absence of her just not going about it that way. It's funny that you still get it from somewhere. And I sometimes got it within more than anywhere else, where I was kind of really strict with myself and hard with myself. And so I talk about this in the book, of this idea of sort of picking one thing, and this is something you help me with, but picking one thing every day that you do every day that's early in your journey, and kind of saying out loud. I don't even go as far as to call it an affirmation, because from our work together, that's can be overwhelming and sound a little woo-woo, and you're like, what are you saying? But the way I went about it was kind of saying, just what's the one thing you really want to hear right now, from you to you, or you would like to hear it from someone else and you're not hearing it. What's one thing that you can kind of whisper to yourself, every time you do a certain thing, or every time those really critical thoughts maybe start to come in and start to judge your own grief in a way that's very harsh, and maybe a beautiful distraction from the grief itself, but also doesn't feel very good. So I wanted to tiptoe you into that. I feel like I could be like I want you to have a talk show, and I could be your producer and be like, can you go into this, please? They're just so excited, to consciously curate your message. But, so I don't even know what I'm asking for really, but just if they're tiptoeing into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love everything you said. And it's that, like that word affirmation is, affirming something that already is. And what trips people up with affirmations is, saying something that they want to believe is true, affirming it, and the voice in their head going, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And so what I prefer to use is declarations. You're declaring something that you want, prefer, or love, versus something that already is that actually isn't. And so, a declaration, so making declarations every day, so a little one for something like this could be like, I declare that I'm okay. I declare that I'm going to be okay, that I'm going to get through this day. I declare that there's love around me. I declare that life sees a bigger picture, that one day I'll maybe be privy to and see that as well, and see the beauty in this. I declare it's okay to have my feelings. I declare that I get to experience all of it, and within a balance that is good for me. And I declare that I get to nurture myself and take care of my needs. And I declare it's okay to have other aspects of my life that I can be in and still have my grief and honor of this person who is no longer here.
I love that. And it's funny because I would jump to maybe a little further in my work of, I always say I make my money making my bed, because every day, that when I make my bed, I have an
Yep.
affirmation that I say around health and wealth, and it's evolved, the sentences have evolved. But I think in those beginning moments, and for those listening, we really started the brunt of our work together when, I mean, I was in a wheelchair. I was in a hospital bed. I wasn't even in a wheelchair yet. We really started right away when I was dealing everything I was dealing with. And I think I was just simply repeating, I am safe, healthy, and whole. Like every time I thought that, kind of counteracted that feeling, that's just what I whispered back. And I didn't even necessarily for a long time feel that it was true as I whispered it back, but I committed to whispering it back until eventually, it did become very true for me. But it was just like this, I really, really felt I gained power and felt empowered by having a response to how critical I was, how worried I was, how stressed I was, how angry I was, how much I wanted to change what could not be changed. It's like at least I had this one thing I could whisper back. And if days went by that were blurry and I would forget maybe to whisper that, I tied it to this one thing that I did every day, which later became making my bed. But even making my bed would have been a privilege at the time that I'm talking about, which is just so odd to even think about now, and gratefully think about. But it was just, I think for me, it was just tied to the first time I saw sunlight. That was the first thing I said to myself, the first time like light entered my eyes. And it's really taking me back, because I'm going like, well, I couldn't really do anything. I was bedridden. So what did I what did I tie it to? And it was when I would first open my eyes. And it was just something like I would continually whisper. And like I said, it evolved into something that people might call an affirmation or whatever. But at the beginning, it was just that soft declaration, of my intentions at the very least, of how I wanted to see things and how I wanted to feel in response to those things. So I think that so beautifully, because you even walked it back perfectly to those declarations, and even reminded me that that's where I started too. It wasn't as far as like this health and wealth affirmation, and about love in my life and all this stuff, that it's become this thing where I make my bed and I make my life kind of thing every day now. But yeah, that's such a wonderful gift.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I just am back recently from my Extraordinary Life Retreat. And one of the things that we kind of got onto, and sort of like that tenderness place is, which I feel like our conversation has kind of gone to, that like self-tenderness and nurturing, is one of the things. Is like, do you ever give yourself a hug and a kiss? And people are like, ooh, that's weird. Like, what do you mean? It's like, let's all give ourselves a hug. And everyone's like, oh, weird, like give yourself a kiss, it's like, okay, weirder. But like every morning when you wake up and every night when you go to bed, like if there's someone beside you, you're going to give them a hug and a kiss, most likely. Your pets, your children, your family, your friends, even, some great stranger you might give a hug. But why is it so weird to hug and kiss ourselves? Like we should be number one, so in those types of declarations, thinking from that tender place of, I'm not going to take it all away. The pain's not going to go away. The person is not going to come back in that form, but there's love. There's still love, and it's okay. And, just like that, embrace and that tenderness, and just having that slowly will start to, it's what helps build strength. When we are in fight or flight, where we're in that place of like, I'm alone, things are bad, healing stops. All the signals from our brain send the chemicals that go into like self-protection. Pause the healing. We don't have time for that right now. We might die. We got to deal with stuff. When we come from that tenderness, even like 1 minute in your bed in the morning before you go and, confront the day, is that the signal to heal, the signal to like self-heal, like within the body, physically. And we know that, physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of it is connected to one another. So if we can bring in some of that healing, some of that love and nurturing from that place, it will help support kind of the mind chatter go on, or will support the emotional part, or whatever that is. And raise us up to get started on the right foot in the morning.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
imagine if I got to
Mhm.
listen to Jen. Way back when. No,
Aw.
I love that. And I think
But
that
can I just honor you for like like my heart hurts a little bit, sometimes when I hear your stories about, you didn't have that and how you had to push through. But
Mm,
I feel like it's one of those reasons why life is like, let's pick this guy. He's going to go through a lot of heavy stuff, but because of what he has for the world, it's going to be worth it. He can handle this. And it's so it's not in vain, I guess, is what I'm saying, is like all the pain and minus some of the tools was necessary for all of us to receive like this, and your wisdom and your tools and your, just your belief in like, hey, you can do this. You can still be alive even with this death that happened.
mhm.
So honor to you for
Thank you. And I will say too, whenever I say that, like, I say this so openly that, community and connection are the reason I'm here. Like I have often said I do feel like the most loved and supported person I've ever known. I was in no way alone or left to tread in the dark ever, and even
Yeah.
then magic like you showing up, and
Mhm.
like there's a lot of that can't be explained that I now just am okay with calling magic, the in between.
Love it.
And
Yeah.
and that's just something that really does exist. And really, yeah, I guess I'm saying that always out of excitement that maybe someone does get it, now a little bit earlier. And
Yeah.
it's it tiptoes into one of those resilience responses, because if you're not ready for it and you haven't spent 5 years doing the work that we've done and everything, it
Yeah.
almost has that everything happens for a reason like feeling, which
Yep.
how I started
Yep.
with. And if anyone's feeling that, yeah, that's totally what you feel in that moment, and that's to be honored too. And for me, that's still a difficult balance. That's always sort of, that. And it was in that, which we talk about much later, which I've already gotten you on oath to agree to come back and talk about, is we get to that point where there is that separation of, okay, in a world where I can't change anything, you know, where has this benefited me and those I love most? And, and I am able to approach that, and only with the delicate, beautiful work that we got to do together. Which is so nice. But thank you for honoring me, and thank you for setting me up to classically reflect right away, right back. I'll receive it when we finish.
Take it
I'm like, and what a
back.
perfect segue, because
Yeah.
I end every episode with the find the funny, and while you were trying to be so beautiful to me, I just really wanted to make it funny so that I didn't
I know.
have
I
to.
know.
I
I
know,
could
and
see that.
I'm
That's
like a
okay.
child.
That's okay.
I have to say it's like it's so funny, because I'm just like getting used to too that, like, we can see each other, but most people will just be listening. So there's so
Okay.
much going on always that, like, you don't know, for all they know, there's like, a fly in and out of our faces and we're trying to
There
talk,
actually
and
was
like
one.
that,
Yeah.
there is like these things. But for the listeners in our pre-talk, Janet kind of said it looks like I'm not looking at her, like I'm looking
Oh,
totally
before
different
we hit record,
opposition. And so the
I'm
whole
like, where are
time
you looking?
when you're talking, I'm thinking like, does she think I'm just staring into the corner being like, yeah, whatever.
Not at
And
all.
and then I'd
Not at
start
all.
to giggle. And it's such a weird thing. And that's why I always wanted this segment to be at the end of the show, is that
Yeah.
has always been, at all the learning and all the unlearning, I've always trusted and known that little giggle, that little you should
Mhm.
laugh while you can, was so
Mhm.
special and so specifically gifted to me. And at large, my siblings, it's the way we grew up, where
Yeah.
it's like, and there's that
Yeah.
part of me that wants to quote unquote like behave and like suppress that. And like, it's like whenever I get the opportunity, I could have these episodes and then we could play like scored music, after such like, talking about deep topics and death, and it's like, but no, if I'm really honoring my grief journey, anytime I get the opportunity to talk about what's funny, or how we could find the funny, or how we can be talking about something so serious and dealing with something so serious, and yet finding points where we're laughing hysterically,
Mhm.
that's the truth of me. And so I'm kind of just setting up this segment a little bit too, as we're, early on in the season. But So one thing I'm doing is making a commitment to ask my guests at the end of every episode is just where they find the funny in life, and or what's making you laugh right now, or just where do you find the funny?
I mean, I'm kind of known to find the funny in the in the inappropriate places at times, where it's like, how come now everybody's not laughing, like dying laughing? So
Yes.
oftentimes it's like the trying to suppress the laugh, which makes it worse. I was the kid who was kicked out of church for giggling. I was the kid who was, like stop laughing, which would be like,
Mhm.
don't say that, you're gonna make me laugh more. I guess just the one that pops up in my mind, I was going to share a different one, but the one that pops in mind is being at the movie theater and was watching a movie, and there was someone who fell asleep and was snoring. And I thought it was hilarious. And nobody else really did. And even the person who I was with, I'm like, and there was like, shh, shh. And I was like, okay. So I'm laughing and I'm just like giggling. And now I'm at the point where now I can't stop. And the movie was at this stuff was going on, so it's like it got really quiet, and so I'm like holding my face, and at that moment where I where you like the snort comes out because you're
Mhm.
trying to suppress,
Mhm.
it comes out, was when there was like a full frontal nude man came on the stage right when I did that, and everyone looked at me like, immature much? It's the snore person, like, do you not
It's
hear?
like a
So
Seinfeld setup. Like
pretty much.
it's not the naked guy, it's the
It's
snore guy. It's not the naked guy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just, I mean, that's kind of my but I know you're one of those people too who would be right beside me, giggling and laughing and going with it. And
Oh yeah, and like it's interesting because obviously on this journey I've connected with so many people around grief that kind of, held the flashlight, as I say, when I didn't feel like I could, or while I was
yeah.
working it out or finding batteries or whatever the hell I was doing. But there was always someone kind of doing it. But anybody who knows me, it's like this weird thing because, and I've had, everyone I've interviewed has kind of said this after when we go off record, like, it's so weird because they don't know how to behave because you're so used to kind of getting the work done, but making everything so fun. But then we're like talking about and to people, who are freshly grieving. And so there's this balance. And I'm like, that is literally my life, is trying to figure out, sort of that balance. And it's like, if there's one thing I get to own around all of this, it's whether or not I get to laugh, and when I get to laugh. But
Yeah.
it's happening so much, and I love that this interview process with each person is bringing it up, because there is that little bit of like, you can be saying, the most profound thing that I want to deliver to other people, but now that I know you so well, there's also this little kid inside of me that I've invited to show up in my life that just wants to play. And I know as soon
Yeah.
as I know how to make someone laugh too, like now that I know your sense of humor, I just like, I've
Yeah.
got something to say to everything. And it's like, okay,
I love
not
it.
now, not
I'm
now,
in.
not now.
I'm
And
in. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't say how much like the find the funny tool in my toolkit out of all the things.
Mm.
And it is in here. Yeah, it is in here. I was like, did I even put that in there? But it is in there. But that, like, how for me, and just for me, and honoring my thing, like, this really is the number one tool I know is the reason that I'm here. It's just, and that oddly, the people who honored and appreciated humor the most, that were closest to me in my life, my father and my brother, like,
Mm.
that was their
Yeah.
game, that was their shtick. It was like, it
Yeah.
was always something. So I never once felt like I shouldn't be embracing humor. Like, if
Good.
anything, they handed
Good.
me the tool right before they left, and it's like, well,
Yes.
obviously they wanted me to use this kind of thing.
Keep
So
doing it. Yeah.
it's just something that I don't know, I just, when you're ready, if you're feeling it, if every time I say find the funny, you want to tune out and not listen to it, then that's cool too.
Yeah.
But I'm going to show up unapologetically, always, equally honoring the journey and finding the funny.
I love
So,
that. Yeah. No rules. No
oh,
rules around humor. Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Amazing.
Well, as we check out, what's one word for how you're feeling checking out?
One word. I'm gonna match your word. I'm gonna say grateful. Super
Mhm.
grateful to be on this interview with you. What a beautiful journey you've had.
I'm going to say glowing, and and for anybody who's going to go on the YouTube or wherever this lives, it's if you watched the whole time, I'm just like, we're talking about grief and I'm just glowing the whole time. And it's
Yeah.
just such a testament to my beautiful stranger on the plane. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I do want to have you, before we leave,
Okay.
let us know where we can find you, what you're up to. I know you've got some badass tribes that I have friends in that are loving. And obviously I think this whole thing has been a testimonial to one-on-one work with you, which is available on your wait list, I'm sure.
Yeah. Right now there's a little wait list. That's okay. So thank you. So the Extraordinary Life Mastermind tribes, I've got a new mastermind starting in the fall, as well as masterclass, but you got to do mastermind first. But also just started the Thriver tribe, which is free. Anyone can join. It's a private group where it's just like badassery all the time. And, we do some live Q&As and post some amazing things. So there would be like a link or something. It's you can search Thriver Tribe and my name, I guess, to find that.
And I'll put the link in the show notes as well.
Or ask Addison. He can invite you to that.
Yeah, I certainly can.
Yeah. I guess my signature work is my 12-week process of foundational action and spiritual. We didn't get into the geeking out on frequency today, but another time we will go there for sure. Some pretty awesome things going on, but yeah, so that would be the gist. Come join the Thriver tribe and then see what else there is from there.
And there's so much. And also your podcast that you recorded back in the day too is something that I go back to all the time. And I think I even refer to it in the book, one of the specific episodes, but that's that gift that you gave when you recorded those is always there for us too, which is really something that I point people towards as well. Because a lot of your concepts and your gifts that even I go back and I want to redigest and I want to hear it again. And I want to, it's an everyday process. And I forget the things that serve me consistently. So I always like that, there's so many ways to kind of find you as well. And I mean, I'm probably the biggest referrer accidentally. People are like, you're so good at sales. And I'm like, no, I'm terrible at sales. But when something really works for me and something I truly believe in, I can't shut up about it. So, it's like,
amazing.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't get a piece of Jen's empire, but I'd like to build it. That's like what I say to people, but it's just, I'm so happy to mention you as often and as much as possible. And if I could gift you to everybody one-on-one, I would, but I also know that it finds you right when it should and when it aligns. And now you're doing these amazing things where you can be with more people at once because one-on-one fills up and then so that's so
there
great.
You go. Exactly. Yeah. Well, likewise, thank you. I'm such a fan as well as yours, and I too have learned a lot from you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, that's all for today.
Well, Grief Club, that's the show. If you enjoyed it, please let us know by liking and leaving a review. This will help as many people who may need what we're talking about find it the fastest. Remember to honor the journey, and when that gets tough, find the funny.